Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of you.
I am Lisa, the host of A Shot Glass of Recovery, and this is our speaker series. Let's sit back and get ready for some more experience, strength, and hope.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marie-France, and I am an alcoholic. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. I'm doing a 90 and 90 right now, and today is day 85. I do that every couple of years. I never plan it. My higher power just speaks to me and says it's time. I call it a refresh and a reboot. So been to a lot of great meetings, and not to lessen anybody's importance, but I want to give a shout out to all my friends that are in Ontario. That's where I got sober. So I feel like I'm even more at home here. And I grew up there. I'm in the East Coast now for 25 years. My parents were originally from here. Anyway, my job this morning is to tell you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. So what I was like, I've been pretty brief about that now because I think it's important for the newcomer or the newly coming back. But I don't think there's anything about my story that's going to be unique. It's another thing I got here in recovery. Born in Quebec City, raised in Southwestern Ontario. My family was a family of four. I was the second oldest of four kids. And I learned alcoholic behavior from the time I was born because my father was an alcoholic. That would mean my mother was a codependent parent and wife. So I learned all the things from them and before I developed my own. I'm proud to say my father passed 3 years ago with close to 40 years of sobriety. And I came in after him and had quite a humbling experience as my father's the one who drove me to detox. And that was my route. I went through a women's detox and then a women's treatment center. And then my journey began. From as far back as I can remember, I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was on the outside of my family. I think it's very common for alcoholics. And so I started drinking and using. I have to use both because there's part of my story, but this is AA. And in my teenage years and as an escape, like everybody else, and sometimes to fit in. Thus began my journey of more isolation and more disconnect. I don't need to share all the gory stories because we've all lived them. But yeah, I was going down that road pretty fast, and because I took outside substances, the abuse to myself and the spiral became much quicker than alcohol. As a matter of fact, I did other substances so I could drink because I couldn't hold my liquor. So, but if I was in the influence of other substances, I could drink as much as I wanted to. And so from the time I kind of left high school and dropped out of university, I was a very lost person. I came out here to go to school, and I spent more time at the university pub than I did in my classes. And then that was my first geographical. I went to university when I was 17, I think. My second geographical, I was in Montreal. And then my third geographical, I was back home. And for the next 6, 7 years, I went from being across in the States to home on the Canadian side. I moved more times than I can think. I quit jobs, left jobs, got fired. Just a completely lost human being and had no idea that it was connected to a substance problem, abuse problem. So in the last 2 years of my drinking, I sought help. I got therapy. I had this wonderful woman who I will remember for the rest of my life who worked with me, and I did stuff like inner child work and blah, 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 and worked on, the dynamics of my family and growing up the way I did. But the problem was I never saw that I had a problem. Everybody was the problem, and what happened to me and where I was raised and with whom was my problem. I was very young, I was in my 20s, and so I had a lot of growing up to do regardless. And so one day I went to treatment with her, and we had hit a wall, and she was a very wise woman and a good therapist because she, instead of dragging it out, made it very clear to me that we had to move on to the next steps in my treatment. And if I wanted to do that I could just show up at my next appointment, which was the following week. And I did what any responsible alcoholic did. I didn't show up and I didn't call either. So that was the end of that. And, I was starting to question whether life was worth living. I was in a dark hole, and what finally hit my bottom is I lost a job again. I had been up partying, so I took certain things to help me sleep. So I slept through my wake up in the morning. I woke up 2 hours late for work. It wasn't the first time. I got to work and I was brought into my supervisor's office. So I knew that wasn't good. And she had to fire me. She had to do her job. And of course, the tears flowed and the whole academy performance was played. And I could see that her heart bled for me. And she was a very kind woman, but she had a job to do. And it was probably as an employer, sometimes myself now as a freelancer, I hire a lot of people, and I had to fire somebody this year on a project, and it's never an easy thing to do, but she did her job, and I never saw that woman again. And I say this often that if I ever did, I would thank her because she didn't realize that that was the beginning of my journey, and she saved my life that day. So tough love is something we need. So what did I do? Well, I decided to drown my sorrows. I went out to a bar. I met up with people. I did substances I hadn't done in years. I drained my bank account. I stayed up all night with some people doing some other things besides drinking. And I woke up that morning. It was the middle of summer. It was very hot. Southwestern Ontario, as those of you know, you know. And I walked out of this house and that little voice said to me, you got to change something. You need help. Like this can't go on. Where I was going was not a pretty place. I was already what we call today couch surfing. I was staying in friend's house I basically had a garbage bag with my clothes because I'd gotten that far with with my situation. And then that other little voice said, you need to get help. And then there's that little voice, that says, no, it'll be fine. Go home, sleep it off. You'll be fine. Right. How many times have we said that to ourselves? But that was the first moment of grace. And grace is a big word for me and divine intervention. And I sought help. So fast forward, I ended up in a women's detox. And, we like to say, get them while they're hot. So while I was vulnerable, I was suggested and offered many options for recovery. And part of me against my will to a certain extent, or, it was a contradiction within me, it was a conflict. And mostly knowing now it was all fear, I entered treatment and I haven't looked back. And so in July, God willing, I'll be 37 years sober. And I have no idea how that happened, except for to say that a God of my understanding that has evolved. Spiritual conditioning for me is very important. And the men and women in these rooms, I've been a member, I've always had a home group and I sponsor and I do the steps and I'm an active member of my group. I do a little bit of service. I'll probably do more when I slow down my work pace. And so that commenced my journey. There was a lot of growing up, a lot of mistakes, a lot of don't do, a lot of the things I was suggested not to do, I did because I was young. When my sponsees come up to me and tell me they're doing these things, I don't tell them what to do. I merely suggest, and always tell them take it or leave it. I'm not here. I'm here to the head of A has to be there, but we have to take it. And I'm here to just share my experience, strength, and hope with a great deal of humility and respect where people are. And my sponsoring habits are kind of like my own sponsors. Like I'm not your therapist, I'm not your partner, I'm not your lover, I'm not your brother, I'm not your sister. Yes, friendships develop in sponsorship at times. But my first job is to share my experience, strength, and hope and try to guide you if I can to what you need and to the people that can help you. For example, I'm not a parent. I have stepdaughters, but I've never had kids of my own. So if I have a woman that I'm helping who is struggling with issues with parenting, perhaps they drank, they have a lot of mothers have a lot of guilt if they weren't sober when they had their kids. I can only identify as a child of an alcoholic, but I can't identify as a parent. So I usually recommend to go talk to other women and talk to them about their experience because I don't have all the answers and I don't have that experience. I try not to put my nose into experiences that I know nothing about. I haven't walked a mile in your shoes and you haven't walked a mile in mine. So that's really important to me. So that's just began my journey. And 25 years ago, one of the things I did was the first time I moved, it wasn't an actual geographical run. I moved to the East Coast because I wanted to leave the city and I wanted to live somewhere where I live bilingually. As you know by my name, I'm French. And I was fortunate enough to have parents who kept that language in the house and in the school. And so I'm gifted with being perfectly bilingual, which has been a great gift for me in all aspects of my life, including work. And so I moved to the East Coast. And when I was here, I want to share this because it happens to a lot of us. When I reached around 20 years of sobriety, I hit an emotional bottom and I crashed. And I had a burnout from work, all of the things, and strongly related to the fact that A, I wasn't taking care of myself, and on all levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, I was going to meetings sporadically, which I highly do not recommend. And so thence began a new sort of a renewal. And there's a set aside prayer that we know in the big book. And I had to set aside actually everything I knew about getting sober, everything I knew about my recovery, and start over. I didn't drink, but I had to renew. I had to renew my spiritual journey. I had to renew how I practice the program, and I had gone back to university at this point, which is highly recommended when you're in a burnout. But I did, very stubborn, and I started making meetings a very important regular thing. And my higher power and my program, I put it back on the top of the list. And there was this little meeting. I was living in a small town where I have a house now, and a small fishing village where my mother's from. It's very French. And in the little town next to it, there's a meeting on Friday nights at the basement of a church. And my dad grew up in that town. And I started going there every Friday night. And I was the only woman there. And these old guys were great. And they had a lot of spirituality. Their whole program was based on their spirituality. And that's what I needed. And they saved me. They saved me emotionally. And, I'd have my classes, a lot of homework. I'm in my 40s. So, the brain was a little rusty. But every Friday night, I mean, that was it. That was my lifeline. And that's when I really understood that first things first is my recovery, my meetings, uh, developing a God of my understanding. And my spiritual journey has changed a lot. About 10 years ago, I started the practice of meditation that I do every morning. And I took a spiritual journey across Canada 1 year. I was freelancing and working from a computer at the time, teaching, so I could be anywhere. So I made this decision that I was going to cross the country by myself, and I went from the East Coast all the way to Vancouver and Vancouver Island, and I went to a lot of meetings, and I stayed with a friend there that I rented a room in their condo, an old colleague from here, the East Coast, and I started reading a lot of books on meditation, including reading over and over again the chapter to the agnostic, which to me is such an important chapter. If you're struggling with the God of your understanding, I suggest you read that chapter and read it a lot, because it'll clearly tell you that you are free to choose the God of your understanding. And it says it in our preamble. One of the things I love about AA is there's no place for judgment on each other's religious beliefs if we have them, on our spiritual journeys, on our sect, denomination, on our race, on our political views. It has no place here. We're here to help each other get sober and stay sober. And I love that. When you come into AA and you're 25 years old and you see the traditions that says the only requirement is a desire to stop drinking, that got me. That got me. Because if there were requirements, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be here. Probably dead. And so that's such a beautiful thing that they put together in our recovery. Today I work really hard at my spiritual conditioning. I have a morning routine, serenity prayer upon awakening. I usually read the daily reflections, sometimes other readings, and then I meditate. I sit up and meditate. And I try to let my higher power's light flow through me. And every year I try to have a little bit of a renewal. I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, but I believe in intentions, which I work on. My intention this year is to work on one of the very important things in our recovery, which is our code, which is love and tolerance. Some days I feel I don't have enough of that. And when I don't, I have to look at myself, like page 417, whenever I'm disturbed, to find some fact or person or thing. I'm not quoting verbatim here. If I'm disturbed by anything you do, I'm the problem. Because if I wasn't disturbed by you, I wouldn't have, if anything you're saying or doing is bothering me, yes, I'm human. I get that. But if it's going to gnaw at me, I definitely have to look at why. Because if I'm not disturbed, anybody's behaviors, words, actions around me, on a normal daily basis shouldn't attain me. It shouldn't push that button. And if it does, it means I got to look at something. If I'm judging you, I'm judging me. So over the time, it's become a very important thing for me my program is a very simple program now. It always was. I just was a complicated person like many of us. And, every day that I get up, I just have to be reminded that I'm an alcoholic. I don't have shame around any of it anymore. I have no shame around my life. I've turned all that over. And one of the keys to that was forgiveness, forgiveness of others and forgiveness of myself. I went to, I don't know if any of you have gone to Puerto Vallarta for the sobriety in the sun, but I have. And one year I went to this workshop and it was on forgiveness. And there was a woman who took a lot of tiles from old Mexican buildings that had ended up on the side of the ocean. And she painted forgiveness on all of them. And at the end of this seminar, we were each given this rock. And I have it in my, there's a place in my room where I sit and I have multiple colored sea glass. I have a place near the water up north, and you know, my tokens are up there, and that little plaque is there. And there's two things I can no longer afford in my life. One is resentment, and that's just anger and resentment. It just puts a wall between me and the sunlight of the spirit, and I can't have that. I don't want that, you know? So I've learned to forgive a lot of people. And there's been some terrible things that have happened to me in my life. And I remember somebody saying, "How could you forgive them for that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. You have to understand that maybe you don't understand why I'm forgiving them, but I'm not forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them so that I'm free. So they no longer carry weight in my heart, in my soul. They no longer carry weight. They no longer occupy free rent in my head. And I have to understand that they're children of God too, and they're unwell. And I don't have to have those people in my life, but I have to forgive them if I want to let it go. And it's freeing. I don't have the energy anymore to hang on to stuff. It doesn't do me any good. It's kinda like, I heard a couple of really good lines about resentment. One was, it's like, "I'm gonna drink the poison hoping you're gonna die." That's not gonna work. And I heard a native man who I know here, he's of Mi'kmaq heritage, a lovely man, who was at a meeting with us on Wednesday night. Somebody was taking a 2-year cake, and he said, for him, resentment is like lighting myself on fire and hoping the smoke will choke you, you know? It doesn't work, you know? I have to learn to have a lot of compassion for others. We get to a place to when we've been sober a while. One of the things that I actually kind of miss is the gift of desperation. I don't have that anymore. So I go to meetings to be reminded of who I am and what I am, but I also go to meetings to give back because somebody was here when I got here. You were here when I got here. I am sober because you people opened the door and welcomed me. You loved me till I could love myself. And if, it says it clearly in our readings that for us to keep what we have to give it away. And I firmly believe that, every time I go to a meeting and somebody takes a 24-hour chip, and that's happened the last 2 or 3 meetings that I've gone to, or as an anniversary, somebody was taking a 24-hour chip. And I think that's the best gift you could give the person having an anniversary, is that the message got out there and that person has showed up. They have showed up. They showed up to get help. I love 1-year cakes. God, I love 1-year cakes. They're the best, you know? And today, when I celebrate an anniversary, I insist on 1 candle. I don't First of all, if they put all my candles on there, we're gonna probably have a fire alarm go off. That's one thing. But I don't even want numbers that say 30, like this summer will be 37. I 1 candle. Somebody asked me, "Why just 1 candle?" I said, "Because I'm only here for today." I got here 24 hours at a time, and anyway, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love that I've had the privilege of going to meetings all over the States and Canada and a little bit in Europe, and everything has changed in my life because of AA. The fact that I moved and left Ontario and left the rat race I was in is because I'm sober. The reason I do what I do today is because I'm sober. Everything is conducive to my spiritual conditioning and my sobriety. If it's not going well, you know, it's not about things happening either. It's about, how do I handle those things? How do I handle life on life's terms today? You know, I try to surround myself with positive people. I send a lot of love and light to those who are struggling, but I have boundaries today. I have boundaries today. If I have a sponsee who's calling me and constantly complaining about the same thing, I understand that they're going to complain about it till they're done. But my usual response is, what have you done for that today? Have you talked to your higher power? Have you gone to a meeting? Have you done the things that one needs to do to get well? And I know it's in God's time and not my time, not just for me, but for you as well, you know? So it's a beautiful, very calm Sunday morning here in Eastern Canada. The snow is falling with no wind. It's not as cold as it was earlier this week. And I woke up incredibly grateful to be sober yet another Sunday morning and remember where the hell I was yesterday and who I was with, you know, not hungover. These are little things that I don't want to ever forget that stuff. It doesn't matter how long I'm sober. At the basis of it is still the humility of just being given a lot of grace. And grace is a huge word in my recovery. And my spiritual conditioning and my 11 step are the things that are the most important to me. Before I wrap this up and share the time, I read the daily reflection this morning, and it was about step one, of course, and it said that step one was the only step we had to do and we could do 100%, you know? And I was told that you get that one and do it 100%, you're going to be okay. The other steps, they're a daily. I don't turn it over to my higher power instantly every day. I try to, but what I also know is I can start my day over at any time. I could get up in the morning. It doesn't happen to me. I don't get up grumpy. Very rarely do I get up grumpy. I don't think I have in many, many years. But if I start my day and it's not going the way that I think it should go, or things happen and I'm not in a good spiritual fit condition, the gift of this recovery has taught me that I can start that day over. I can have a horrible morning and choose to change that at any time. Recovery has given me the power of choice. I didn't have choices before I came here. I couldn't choose to drink or not drink. I couldn't choose to use or not use. It was survival, and it's what I knew. And I hear a lot of people say it worked. It worked till it didn't, right? And it stopped working for me at a very young age. And I'm very grateful for that. I realize I'm a unicorn of sorts to have stayed sober back to back, having gotten sober so young. I take none of it for granted. I sure as shit, excuse my language, don't think I'm any better or different or special than anybody. This is my journey, and I truly believe that my higher power knew that I would probably not survive. I don't think I'd survive relapses because of the type of alcoholic that I was, and practicing alcoholic, I mean, because I'm still an alcoholic. But I love AA, as I said. I'm starting to ramble here, and I'm just really grateful to be here. And the one thing I can tell you if you're new or coming back is just remember you are never alone. Never alone. You can go to a meeting now 24/7, 7 days a week. And if you can't get to one in person, we have this. This is a gift. And yeah, there's that. And to remember that, we're never alone. And the sooner one works on one's spiritual conditioning and connecting with a higher power, the better. It's easy to contact people now. We can pick up the phone, we can text, we can do all those things. But there still might be that moment in your life where you can't reach another human being. It's possible. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they can't answer your text. Maybe they didn't see your text or your call. So then what do? That's been my thing for years now. What do I do? Oh, here we go. I reach out to my higher power. So even when I'm alone, I'm not alone. Even when I'm full of fear, I'm not alone. And I just tap into that. And with practice, I start to believe in it and it works. It's like we say, it works if you work it. So I would trade, I'll finish with this cliche that we all know. I would trade my best day drunk for my worst day sober. And my worst day sober is at around 5 years of sobriety. My brother was killed in a car wreck. Never once did it dawn on me to drink. That's when I knew this was working. And I've gone through a lot of things, as many of you have, and we can't compare. Life is life, and we all go through stuff. And, I know there are people that are better off than me in many ways. I know people that are worse off than me. And that's irrelevant. What matters is that we're all here, and we're all here to lift each other up and carry each other through the day, hopefully another sober day, and carry on. So that's my message for today, whatever that meant to anybody. If I touched one of you, if it resonated with anybody and it helps you get through another 24 hours sober, then I've done my job today. So I will wish you all a good 24, as we say here in the East Coast, and I'll keep them for myself. Thank you very much.
Just a quick reminder to subscribe, like, or follow if you like the show on any of your favorite listening platforms. If you like the speakers and other content on the podcast, please show us some love by leaving a review and consider making a PayPal contribution to help keep the show going at paypal.me/a shot glass of recovery. Every dollar makes a difference, and we thank you. Our speakers come from my AA home group, AA Solution Seekers. We meet every day at 7 a.m., so pop in sometime and say hello. Until next time, thanks for joining me on a shot glass of recovery.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.